Hello and welcome to episode 86 of the Daft Souls podcast. Today I'm joined by Quentin Smith.
Hello, Matt Lees.
And Keza McDonald.
Hello, Matt Lees.
Hello, I'm Matt Lees, and this is a podcast about video games.
This is like an avuncular podcast because Matt has set up a brand new microphone equipment. Me and Keza have been welcomed in. We're sat here looking at you.
No touching, though.
There's no touching.
No touching.
Yeah, it's a new setup, which means that we're not entirely sure how well it will work. There might be gremlins and boglins.
We could theoretically all hold hands around the circle.
Oh my god, that would.
We absolutely could.
I've been holding my hot coffee, so my hands are super clammy, which would give this a very like geeky, soiled palms feeling.
I've just spent the day at a games conference, so no worries there.
Oh yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Majestic. Well, let's talk about some video games.
So you were at Brighton's Develop conference.
I was.
And this today was full of Pokemons.
It was. So Pokemon Go, obviously, it's been out, sort of, in that you can sideload it onto your Android or mess around with your Google permissions.
I've seen so many people playing it, even though it only came out today.
Yeah, it came out this morning, technically. But for those of us who were, for some reason, constrained, it is technically and officially out today.
Hooray!
But yeah, so the Develop conference is like 2 days in Brighton every year. It's basically just British indie developers and investors and people. It's not E3, but it's very nice. It's fun to go to. And but today it was almost deserted because everyone had downloaded Pokemon Go, and there were just loads of people wandering around Brighton Beach staring at their phones.
Yeah, well, there are not a lot of Pokemon in the conference centre.
Turns out, no, they're mostly outside.
Yeah,
loads and loads of Pokemon outside. Like I wandered around Brighton for a bit this morning with it, and they're everywhere.
Fucking nothing around here. It's pure bats and rats.
You got a Pokestop up at your church, like 2 minutes
I
that
know,
way.
I've got lots of Pokestops nearby, but no bloody fucking pokers.
No bloody fucking pokers.
I have a question. So all the screenshots I've been seeing of Pokemon Go are all first generation Pokemons.
Yes. So this is very clever of them because so basically every 20 minutes today, I've been called up by some completely baffled BBC or Sun or Daily Mail journalist being like, well, not Daily Mail, but whoever.
Saying, do my job for me.
He says, he's basically being like, help, what's happened? Why is Pokemon suddenly a thing again?
Mm-hmm.
And the clever thing is, like, everyone, the Telegraph or whatever, are talking about it as if it's a new kids thing. But everyone who's playing it is my age.
Right, this is what I'm saying.
So they put all the first generation Pokemon in because that's the nostalgia button.
I've seen loads of kids playing it.
Oh
as well.
god, we're not going to have another fight about nostalgia on another podcast with you on because I don't want to play the grumpy guy, but yeah, it's funny how like we're into this world of Pokemon, the wonderful new children's game for children, and except it's not because
no, it's not. It's for people who were between the ages of 9 and 12 in about 2000.
Right, who now have access to the high quality mobile devices and who also have the freedom to wander around.
I don't know though.
Well,
I think Pokemon.
Kids will play too.
I think Pokemon's been one of those enduring things that like
it has. Yeah.
It's continued, and obviously a lot of the newer ones have been shit in terms of the designs of the Pokemon.
You know what? Let's return to this discussion again, because I've been playing Pokemon X and Y as of this week, and I tell you what, those designs are not shit. I think
no, they're good. X and Y is a good one.
Yeah,
but X and Y was one of the good ones.
No, man, I think we've been massively unfair because I was going back as well and looking at some of the original Pokemon designs, and I think,
mate, some of one of the more recent ones I played, one of the Pokemon was just a sword. Like they come on, like they were not as
yeah. But
as
do you remember
brilliant.
Jinx?
Yeah, that's true.
And like the one that's just a magnet.
Magnetite.
Yeah. Voltorb. Just like, can we draw some
down
eyes
Pokemon ball with
on
eyes
a
on?
Pokeball?
Yeah.
Is that one? No, admittedly, yeah. But
yeah, I think it's one of those things like whenever new Pokemon designs get announced, it's they're not as good as the original ones, but I think you're probably right, Quentin. They probably are. It's just that we have different associations.
Yeah, I was thinking of the new starters in X and Y, and they're all loads of fun.
No, it's not the
no,
Oshawott.
it's not
one,
Oshawott. It's
well, the starters are always pretty decent,
except for in the original Pokemon where they were kind of lame.
What?
Bulbasaur is lame.
I chose Bulbasaur. I love me some Bulbasaur.
Yeah, people love them though.
Bulba bad.
People love Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander.
But yeah, so basically you've got the whole country and all of the media freaking out over Pokemon Go, not understanding that basically what's happened is that a childhood fantasy that anyone our age had now just exists in the actual world, and it's amazing. Like technology's enabled that to happen, and it is quite magic. Like I know it's only, but if it wasn't Pokemon, it would be no one would care. But because it's Pokemon, it's like the kind of real world realization of a childhood fantasy world that you love when you're a kid. For me, it would be the same if it were Narnia, or like anything else.
And I do think it's spanned across those generations. I think it's interesting. It's one of those things where lots of people talk about Pokemon and go, "Oh, but it's been the same game for 20 years." It's like, yeah, it has, and it's been the same game for 20 years for lots of different people.
Yeah,
and
that's kind of all Nintendo games.
Yeah, and so it means loads of kids are still discovering it. Like when I was walking around yesterday, I went for a quick run, and I so many school kids playing it, like aged from like 8 to 12, because they're all just on the way home. I almost just completely took out a group of them by accident because I was just
Were you on your bike?
I was just sprinting. I was running, and I wasn't really looking where I was going because I was checking my phone, and I was sort of like, doing that horrible thing of just assuming that other people are looking where they're going, and then just at the last minute looked up and just almost just ran into 3 9-year-old girls who were all just fixated by their phones, and it was like, they were just looking for.
My partner's writing an article on just sort of collating all of the various Pokemon stories that have come up. So we have been exposed to like all the good and bad stories, the good stuff. Nicest one I saw was there was an animal shelter in America who said, hey kids, if you're walking around this area, come in and we'll give you a dog to walk. And the dog will be like your Pokemon finding buddy. And so the dogs in the shelter get a free walk, and the kids get to walk a dog while they're out walking anyway.
That is adorable.
Yeah, it's
what
great.
What a lovely, lovely idea.
Got a lot of shares on Twitter, and obviously then we had the story of the girl finding the body out back of her house next to a river.
There is some weird stuff about it. I mean, at the moment we've got a lot of, obviously, because it's become such an overnight sensation, you've got this heady mix of people saying, isn't this amazing? It gets people out. It's fantastic. And people going, this is going to kill kids, probably. And security.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
so it's
tabloid headlines.
It's another example of like tech stratification, right? Because it's a wonderful toy if you can walk around your neighborhood, but guess what? If your neighborhood is full of crimes.
The thing is, though, I've been for a couple of walks in the past week, and I've been a couple of walks with Pokemon Go and without, and it does kind of defeat the point of going for a walk, if I'm entirely honest, in the fact that rather than walking around and just doing nothing and allowing your brain
out
to
of
just
whatever space you're in,
you're just walking around constantly staring at something that isn't really doing much a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'm conflicted over the assertion that it's the solution to childhood inactivity. Because it's like, well, I mean, at least they're physically moving, but they're not engaging with the real world any more than they would be if they were sitting at home.
No,
in my opinion,
that's the thing.
And that's just from what I'm doing when I'm playing it. Like,
and I think
I'm
actually,
not engaging with the world around me when I'm playing Pokemon Go.
So wait, so I and I want to talk a bit about this because the Pokemon Go framework comes from Ingress, which was Google's previous alternate reality game mobile thing. And I didn't interact too much with my phone in that. But the funny thing in that is you just had to walk to points and then press a button, which meant there was less of the magical looking through the camera and then the Pokemon appears in front of you, right?
Well, that's not how it works. It's there's a Pokemon and then your phone vibrates and then you tap on the Pokemon and then you go into the looking through your camera
AR
fighting
mode,
them.
yeah.
Yes, that's what I guess meant.
And the main problem, I guess, with it is the fact that you've got like you have to, and this is something they'll hopefully fix, but at the moment the app is so finicky that like you have to have it open all the time for it to do stuff.
Okay.
You can't just like
you
run
can't
it.
just be like, oh, where is it? Oh, it's at the church. I'll just close that and turn it on again in 5 minutes when I get to the church. It doesn't really.
It doesn't work.
You can,
It's
but it takes
constant, and
ages.
that's why you see people walking around with their phone out, and it's hilarious. The number of people I've walked past, it's really funny because I'm like, I know what you're doing, because there are people who are walking around with their phone up and not really touching the screen, and then as soon as you get close to them walking past, they immediately start like tapping on stuff as if they're going like, oh, I'm just, I guess I'm doing my emails or something. And it's like you're just playing Pokemon.
Okay, so
mate.
the tech still isn't quite there yet.
It's a bit crap,
I think
to be honest.
in about a month, I think it'll be much better.
Well, it's funny because
I'm not sure it'll still be a thing in a month.
as someone who played a lot of Ingress and didn't play Pokemon Go, I mean, it sounds very similar to the tech problems that Ingress had to do with GPS, which varies from country to country as well. Actually, Ingress's coolest mechanic, which isn't in Pokemon Go, I don't think, is that when you wanted to capture points in the world rather than setting your Pokemon to fight, there were 8 nodes that were put geographically in a circle around the thing. So it's not just a case of walking to your local church. It was a case of having to go to your local church and then be about 40 feet from it 8 times in a circle. So you had to navigate stuff, which meant there was a lot more kind of exploration of your environment. You had to draw circles and draw shapes with how you were walking, which was super neat.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it. At the moment, functionally, there's just not a lot there, and it doesn't work very well, and the app is kind of bobbins. So
Magic is there, though.
The magic is there, and this is the interesting thing: is at the moment, no one really knows where it's going or what it's doing. But so many people are playing it now that I assume that there'll be enough people buying the extra pokey things and making the money.
Well, I saw
It's
that
top grossing. It's top grossing on both Android and iPhone.
Which is nuts.
And most downloaded
those
within 2 days. That's like overtaking Clash of Clans and all the other stuff.
And those games
Candy
print
Crush, all
money.
those ones, yeah.
But, so we've had a lot of online sort of slightly viral games in the last couple of years. It's like, where is it going? And the answer is
nowhere.
I
mean, it is possible, but in my head, what's going to happen is that it will, get more and more feature rich. And the idea, like what I'm
That's
hoping,
the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hoping will happen is that in a few months, it'll be like, I'll get a notification on my phone saying there's a gym meet here. and you'll go along and loads of people will have turned up with Pokemon teams.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It's super light at the moment. Actually, because there is fighting in it, but it's the combat to me that feels the most disappointing because there's this kind of faintly rubbish swiping game.
Yeah, but when they add
it's
in
like,
proper combat,
yeah, why not just
If
use?
they add in
But it's that's the thing. It's
Yeah,
like,
it's
why
true.
not just use the combat? Why not just use like?
Well, probably because they're talking. I mean, Pokemon Go is being played by. I mean, I could say that on Kotaku, Pokemon Go has been bigger than E3. Like, it's been huge. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Like,
the
we had,
numbers
like,
people are getting
between
on these
500,000
articles,
and 1 million people reading almost everything we write about it. It's mad. And I think that what that means is it's not necessarily people who play Pokemon even. It's just people who remember what Pokemon was.
Well, right. This is my thing. I think if you put Pokemon's fighting system in front of...
Which is very complex, actually.
Yeah, if you put it in front... This is why it's been nuts for me playing X and Y this week for some reason. But yeah, I think all the people who are on my Twitter feed playing Pokemon Go, if you put the full, robust Pokemon fighting system in front of them, they would be put off.
Oh no, I don't think it would need to be like full and robust. I just think like, why isn't it just a simple like choose a move?
But then you
thing?
get into the system of you have to take Pokemon's IP, the intellectual property of how that fighting system works, and then Nintendo would have to be willing to give that to a bunch of Google engineers.
And Niantic,
who then break it down into a simpler version of itself.
Sure,
which I think is something Nintendo wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, I mean
agree to.
their mobile strategy is very much partnership rather than
exactly
develop. I mean, well, they guide. It's kind of like how they would work with a second party developer. They kind of guide them, but they don't. They're not making a version of Pokemon, of their own Pokemon for mobile. They're making a thing that uses Pokemon, but that it's its own game.
So, but this is the fun thing, because when I see people tweeting about some of the most exciting features of Pokemon Go, it is just Ingress. And Ingress existed
when it uses the exact same network of information.
Right.
So people have actually found that you can kind of hack the game by downloading Ingress, and then like there's no specific markings to show you where the Pokemon are in Pokemon Go.
Okay.
You get vague ideas of there might be something over there. But then apparently if you download Ingress, there are actual like physical points which are basically where the Pokemon are.
Uh-huh.
So if you have, but again, this is what's so bizarre about this as a phenomenon. It's a wonky app that crashes a lot. And whenever you load it up, is massively intrusive. The killer for me is that every time you load it up, it just stops your music. It's like, and then if you have to go back to Spotify to continue music, by the time you then tab back to it, sometimes it decides that it's closed it and you have to open it again anyway. And it's just like...
There's a lot of work to do on it.
And it takes ages to load. And then when you're running, it drains your battery like a beast. Like you have to walk around. If you want to play it out and about...
Though? That's actually a good idea because, speaking from experience, kids will just play it until the battery runs out. So the fact that the fact that the battery runs out after an hour at the moment is probably.
But it's their phone. Then you've got kids in the middle of nowhere with no phone. It's not. I mean, I don't think that's a good thing. It's hard to describe. I don't know.
It is funny though how I think we can all agree is very much just a reskin of Ingress has set the world on fire.
It's because Pokemon, man. Pokemon was. I mean, it meant so much to kids at the time.
Yeah,
and those kids are grown up and they still care.
I mean. You know what? I understand. I'm just saying, even with that, it is still slightly nuts to me.
I wouldn't have predicted this. Like, what's funny, there was a great tweet going around that was like, Nintendo's mobile strategy. 2008, what's an iPhone? 2010, no idea. 2012, still nope. 2016 changes the way society functions.
But this is the thing. It's like... they still could. It's not Nintendo changing the way society functions. It's Google again changing the way society functions by going.
But it's Niantic. Not
Nintendo.
Google. Can we just say it's not Google? It's Niantic.
Okay, sorry. Yes,
people left Google to form Niantic.
My bad.
Yeah.
So it's the ex-Google engineers.
Yeah.
I'm very glad.
But those same people. Yeah.
So a bunch of ex-engineers going, we'd like to change the world. Can we do it? Oh, we can't do it with Ingress. Nintendo, can we just borrow your brand for maybe 3 months?
But I think this says a lot to me because Nintendo, also something else that happened today is that Nintendo announced a miniature fully functional NES that when you buy it, it comes with like 35 of the best NES games, and that's broken the internet as well because people are like, it's going to
sell. It's amazing how many ways they can work out to sell you the same games again and again. And
but
again.
The thing is that as a long-term, lifelong Nintendo fan, which is a very, very frustrating thing to be when you're over 12, the thing that's kind of struck me about the last few weeks is that Nintendo suddenly appears to have fucking got it. Like with retro games, for instance, they would never release a retro collection. They'd never they just dick around with the virtual console and make you buy the same Mario Brothers for £3.49 every time. And it was just, they've never known how to, or if they have known, they haven't wanted
how to tap into the seam of nostalgia well.
Exactly. And that's obviously should be a huge part of their business now. And it is in a way because when you buy the new Mario, you're thinking about the old Mario, but they're not effectively selling their older stuff in a way that takes advantage of how culturally dominant it was, especially in America. So this mini NES, which comes with 30 games, is reasonably priced. I'm like, fucking hell, that's someone somewhere has gone, oh, let's do this, and Pokemon Go as well. That's an example of what happens when Nintendo just lets other clever people just have a go with their IP. I hate that word. What's another word for that?
Brand.
Brand. I hate that
mean,
word
brand.
too.
I mean, let's be.
Brand is what it is.
Yeah.
It
Right,
is
so
a
yeah,
brand,
they're properties. They're
property, sure.
And I think that hopefully this will open the door to, because Nintendo for a brief period in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, they were letting other people do things like Capcom would do a Zelda. In fact, they did several Zeldas and they were all really good.
Yeah.
And obviously Retro Studios even did Metroid.
Oh, of course, yeah, which was the best thing to happen
was extraordinary.
to the Metroid brand.
And then Rare did a Donkey Kong.
I'm going to say the word brand as much as Donkey Kong, great brand.
Rare did Donkey Kong 64, which was ace. And so there was this period.
Jungle Beat as well.
Donkey Kong 64 wasn't ace.
I loved it. Shut up.
That game had way too much fucking fluff in it.
But the people at home,
epic.
Matt cannot make eye contact with Keza while he says
I can't.
There's tension in the room.
I'm not fighting.
To be fair, I've not played it since I was about 10.
That was the point where things started getting really fucking silly with it, when 64 3D platformers with collectibles.
No, but it meant so much, like, at the time, because I could only have like 3 games a year.
Yeah.
It was really,
I think this is more the 10-year-old factor.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway, so Nintendo did let other people do stuff with their brands, and then they sort of really, really pulled back, and and they've been far too conservative the last 10 years or so. You know, since the Wii, they seem to develop this mythology that they could do no wrong after the Wii. And Nintendo's not in business trouble, but it's got so much money that it could operate at a loss for like years and years and years and be in no trouble. Nintendo's never
probably
doomed.
has.
Yeah, it has operated it's operated a loss for like, I think 6 quarters in its entire 100-year history.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Like, it annoys me because the kind of Nintendo is doomed thing has been going around for about like 15 years, and it just isn't, and it's annoying. But it has been very, very kind of non-progressive as a business, and it just seems like very suddenly that someone somewhere has.
Well, they are simultaneously
listening.
incredibly static and ludicrously progressive.
Well,
when you look at things like the Wii
and Splatoon, which is
Splatoon.
insanely
I was
good
actually
shooter.
I was going to mention Splatoon earlier being just such a fantastic. People talk about Overwatch and everything Blizzard's doing, and Overwatch is exactly 1/4 as exciting and interesting as Splatoon.
I'd agree with that. I think Splatoon's one of the best shooter games that's ever been made. It's extraordinarily good.
And clever in just every single way.
And it's just Nintendo looking at multiplayer shooters, and this was a new team. Like, this wasn't the old Nintendo hands. This was a new team, and I can't remember who the producer is, but he's like a new talent at Nintendo. And they just looked at the multiplayer shooter and went, how do we make that accessible and fun for everyone?
Yeah.
And they've just opened it right up, to the extent that Overwatch, you're never going to get your mum to play Overwatch or your kid to play Overwatch, really. But you'll get your kid to play Splatoon.
Yeah.
Really easy.
So long as we're talking about other smart moves, I do just want to go back to that point of Pokemon Go featuring the original 150 Pokemon and no more.
Smart.
Because I tell you what,
for now,
weirdly, sure, I was playing the Pokemon collectible trading card game, which is genuinely aimed at 9 or 10-year-olds who buy booster packs, and you will recognize none of the Pokemon in it. It is all Mega Evolution. It's the names of trainers you've done. I mean, sorry, I tell a lie. You would.
No, I haven't played a Pokemon properly for many years.
Okay, sure. Well, anyway, it's all the Mega Evolved forms of Pokemon. It's Pokemon you've never seen. It's, as someone who played that brand, circa the late 90s, I recognize nothing.
Well, also the thing is, it wasn't just the games. The brand was bigger than that. And that's why, I mean, a lot of the time,
exactly,
when we were playing it, we were like, well, when it came out, I was about 14, 15, 16, I guess. But then the cartoon was huge, and there were kids who were like 6 were already watching the cartoon.
So this is what I'm saying is interesting, because within Pokemon's branding by Nintendo, you have the cartoon and the trading card game and the new DS games, which are so weird and new. And then you have Pokemon Go, which we, as like older critics, are still referring to as Pokemon, but it's not. It's this very sort of arcane stripe of older Pokemon. It is so much more targeted.
They still had all the new ones in. They still had all the old ones in the newer games as well. It hasn't been like...
not all of them.
Not in all of them, but in a lot of them there have been.
But I'm just saying, you can see a massive division in the kind of Pokemon that you get in Pokemon Go versus the trading card game and all the new video games.
But I in my head now, I'm just imagining Pokemon Go as a thing that I can play with cross-generationally with people just in my neighborhood and who happen to be around.
So how do you play it with people in your neighborhood? Because
you just say hello.
That's the extent of it.
So basically, the other night in Brighton, I went out with the Android version that I got, and I went out with a couple of friends, and we just went out Pokemon hunting. We met another group of people who were also out Pokemon hunting.
If there's a Pokemon in the world, can everyone have it?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like you grabbed it and then now I can't.
No, everyone can, and everyone can be like, "Oh my god, there was a Gyarados. There was a rumor going around that there was a Gyarados on Brighton Pier today."
Wow!
And everyone was like, like the people were literally like making excuses to leave meetings to go and see if they could get this Gyarados. I didn't get to check. If
I saw a photo.
There.
I think Santa Monica on the pier. Like there was just apparently there was a Blastoise there, and there was just like the entire
already
Santa Monica kind of that fun fair on that pier. It's just like crammed with people.
It is crazy. Like people flock, and it hasn't been out yet properly. Even And we were out at night and we saw like at least 3 or 4 other groups of people who were quite.
And so it's weird. In some
Pokemon
regards,
Go.
it's kind of like I'm playing it, and I've been playing it a bit, and I'm aware it's bullshit because it's just like it's not a very well made thing, like, and it's frustrating in many ways. And there's things I want to do in it that it makes me do like really tedious way. Like when you want to get rid of Pokemon, you just have to like do them one by one. You're just like, I don't want all these fucking Rattatas in my box. Like, I just want to get rid of them. So there's all these things but then I know that it's just the allure of it being like Pokemon.
What you're playing is the real world. You're just playing, going out and exploring and talking to people. That's really what you're playing. The Pokemon is sort of.
God, you know what it is? Have you heard of geocaching?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
It is, yeah.
I have heard of that because I was in Iceland last weekend and I found a geocaching box and I had no idea what it was.
Oh, and someone explained it to you?
Well, I freaked out because I took a picture of it and then I kind of picked it up and it said geocache location do not disturb on it, and I freaked out and put it back and thought like it was some government thing. And then yes, I tweeted
like
about it.
Plastic
Someone...
picnic box.
I can't recall
the government.
Yeah.
I can't recall who it was, but somebody on Twitter was just called. It's called Geodude caching. I mean, that's basically what it is.
It is, but they're. You know what always got to me about Ingress is the thing that you two were complaining about earlier, which is the lack of accuracy within GPS locations. Whereas geocaching can have stuff like it is under this one rock on top of a mountain.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah.
I mean, there's a level of.
I found it under a rock on the edge of the sea in Reykjavik.
Nice.
But then the thing is, though, I went back and I got it, and I thought if I get into geocaching, that is the end for me. Like it's too cool. I will end up getting really, really into it.
Well, isn't the thing as well that for people at home who don't know what this is, so you just get a very accurate GPS locator, and then people you can create caches, and a cache is really just a box containing some things.
Yeah, and you put your name in the box in the
yeah, and you also leave a little item, right?
Yeah, you leave a little.
So you take one thing of your choice from the box, and you leave one thing, and then you get a collection of items that you found from all over the world.
Exactly, it is very cool. It's a cool concept. But yeah, the kind of meta game of that, like going and finding boxes on a hill isn't fun. What's fun is telling people about it and becoming part of a kind of community.
Oh, sure, or creating caches yourself and then posting riddles as to their location and stuff.
Yeah, so that's kind of the Pokemon Go situation. So taps into that. Like, what's fun isn't walking around staring at your phone and flicking at Pokemon.
But I suspect this temporary, like society always has these moments, these little like flash in the pan things where everyone is joined by something.
You're saying that on those TV programs in 10 years of Do You Remember the 2010s,
exactly.
It'll be like, oh yeah, everyone was playing Pokemon Go. And
for a
like
week.
When I went for a run this morning, like I ran past 2 Japanese dudes and they both had their phones out in a certain way, and I thought they're playing Pokemon Go. And sure enough, as I went by, I like had a quick glance and saw they were. And I stopped and said, "Oh, you catch anything good?" And it's like this will be something that happens for the rest of this week if people are going, "Oh, I got any Pokemon?" And then I think that will be that.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know. I don't like to make predictions about this because I've been wrong many times. I thought mobile gaming was not going to be a thing. Stupid. But what it reminds, the only thing I've ever seen remotely like it is how Monster Hunter used to be in Japan.
Yeah.
Like where everywhere you went in Japan, people were playing Monster Hunter, and you used to be able to just pull out your PSP and join in and make friends on a train for 5 minutes. Well, for the half hour that it would take you to do a quest. Or like, I remember going to a cat cafe and a bunch of dudes sort of starting playing PSP in there. And again, you just pull out your console, join in, and it's very much like, but it's everywhere, kind of omnipresent. Whenever you see someone with a PSP, you know they're playing Monster Hunter, and it feels a bit like that with Pokemon Go now. You see someone holding their phone a certain way, and you're like, I know what you were doing.
Exactly.
There is something I find kind of floofy about the Pokemon fiction, which this is kind of like making clear, which is I always wondered why within the world of Pokemon, if Pokemon exists and you catch Pokemon, you want to be the best. The reality of Pokemon would be so grim because it would be tens of thousands of kids all trying to be the best. And none of them can be the best.
Well, that's the fantasy.
I'm already getting fucking shunted out by the locals around
This is
here,
what
like,
I'm saying. Pokemon Go tells you that in real life, Pokemon would be a horrible grind where everyone is, racing to get ahead. And
I can't do anything in it. Like,
was.
every time I go to a gym, I always have a look, and it's like the level of things in it already. I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. Like, so it's kind of weird, actually. It's kind of like antithetical to what Pokemon is being like.
Yeah, because the card game and the video game and, well, everything except...
You go to a gym and maybe you're not quite ready, but then you train a bit and you'll do it. Whereas I know...
Yeah, they play into the fantasy of you're the... Well, it's just classic childhood empowerment fantasy.
But before it's already out, I'm already going in and I'm like, that Pokemon's level 500 and mine's level 150. It's like, I can't do this.
This is the thing. I think it's interesting to have the classical empowerment fantasy, but now we have an AR game that has that and shows that it's incompatible with the real life.
But, though, Pokemon's always had that kind of... One of the reasons it was always universally popular amongst all kinds of kids was that it has the collect and trade and battle thing. So, like, if you're, a certain type of
kid... You just want to collect them, yeah.
You just want to pick them all up. And other people are more interested in having a really strong one that will.
Yeah.
Like I remember when my brother used to play Pokemon with me, and he always used to just have this one Pokemon on his team that was like really strong, and that was how he played the game.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what though, I bet a lot of
care
this
about the other
is going to come down to fair weather traders, because at the moment it's the summer. Oh, my sweet summer child.
Yes.
Who's going to be doing this when it starts pissing around?
In Edinburgh in February.
Yeah, like you have to walk around, and I mean the thing is, when you're catching Pokemon, you have to take your gloves off and keep swiping. And who's going to do it?
I am actually going to buy some of those gloves with the special.
With the finger pad.
Really?
You still have to press
Genuinely.
quite hard.
What, for this?
For Pokemon, I would do it.
What?
I like the idea of running. Like, I'm going to try and get my stepson, if anyone listens to me on this podcast before, he's resistant to Nintendo, always has been.
Okay.
Because I like it. So,
classic.
But all his friends play Pokemon Go already. Like, I know this because he has an Instagram. And all his friends are talking about it on his Instagram anyway. So I'm really hoping that we might be able to go out together and catch Pokemon. That would be so brilliant.
That'd be great.
That would mean loads to me. And I think that this might be the one Pokemon game that has actually managed to jump the generations, perhaps. And that, the kids will be into and the adults will be into.
Well, the thing about kids is kids are just into what everyone's into.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's big, they'll check it out.
Mm.
It is true that, I mean, even like stuff like Skylanders, like stuff that, I guess Minecraft is the closest thing.
Every child is into Minecraft.
But every child,
like
and also that adults can still engage with.
That's true, yeah. I mean, Minecraft actually got to a point where it got too complicated, I think. Not for kids, but for adults. Like it certainly got
the tech stuff.
Yeah, and the enchanting it got too complicated for me to be bothered with after a while. And I had a great time playing that with my stepson when he was about 6, because I knew more about it than he did, and we had a fantastic time. But like the second that he started like overtaking me in knowledge, and also they just kept adding stuff in. Like I'd take a break from it and come back and have no idea what was happening because he's 7. He can't explain to me. So it just becomes a more frustrating experience.
Yeah.
And the good thing about Pokemon Go is it's super, super simple. Like it's never. I mean, one of the points of Pokemon, kids love things that they can study to the extent that they know more about it than adults. That's always been the case. Like when I was 10, I was a huge nerd anyway, but I loved Pokemon specifically. And like the extent of my knowledge about like movesets and types and stats and all this was just absurd. I remember I would quiz my parents on things they couldn't possibly have known. Like, what's the dual type of a Charizard or whatever. And I just took pride in that knowledge that I had, and it was secret special knowledge that you only had if you were a kid.
It is fascinating now that one of the things that Pokemon Go does have, which is fascinating, because it's very much, I think of the zeitgeist that in a few years people look back on and go, yeah, or maybe it will have expanded, who knows, is it has the same thing of Snapchat, it being like really willfully obscure, like you don't really know how to do stuff and it doesn't tell you exactly. And so you actually have secrets again in the way that we used to have with games when we were growing up, where you'd be like, oh, do you know you can do this? Do you know if you hold down the thing? And all of these techniques, actually often children are much more fluent in them than we are because of stuff like Snapchat. They know that if you just hold the screen or double tap the screen, something will happen. Whereas we just be like, without an instruction or without something, a button to hold or a button to double tap, we'd just be like, well, what? The idea that you just hold down in the middle of the screen and something will happen, we'd just be like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it hadn't told me to do that. Like, that's bad UI.
And I mean, I heard that was the whole thing with Snapchat, is they purposefully made it obtuse and obscure. So when you jump into it, adults will be put off by it, because Facebook started to have a lot of problems with the fact that
this is the end.
Well, that's the thing. Facebook had problems because mum and dad started using it, and then it wasn't cool anymore. Because
your grandparents started like posting really embarrassing comments on your. Yeah, kids don't use Facebook.
So Snapchat was purposely made to be confusing so that people bounce off it. And
that's really cool.
I've never been happier to be generation gaps. Oh, God, this is awful, though.
But no, it's cool.
Snapchat's one of those things, like I remember someone in March showing me IGN's Snapchat app, and I literally couldn't figure out what I was looking at. I was just like, can someone explain this to me? What is happening?
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird.
It's like a face paint box and a broadcasting platform.
Yeah, I don't understand it at all, which is fine. I don't need to.
I've got my head around it now, but that's part one of the problem. It's not going to be cool because of that. Like because people like me now understand it. Like that's like sliding right into the bin of things that are not cool.
The bin of things that are not cool.
I imagine like a child playground slide, all plastic, and you slide slightly slowly down
into a plastic
trying to scrabble
bin.
up it as well.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
But I think it's really awesome that when we grew up, there'd be like myths and stuff of being like, oh, do you know you can do this? Like in Pokemon especially.
I mean, they still have the myths, otherwise known as lies. They still have those. They're kind of perpetrated through YouTube.
Yeah, but
now.
I love the fact that like 2 days ago, people were tweeting about stuff. Like, I love that there was this universal thing. The game had come out, but nobody knew what the fuck was going on. Like, it's like, what does this work? How does this? It was kind of a mystery, and people were making up stuff, and people were like guessing at things.
We can all agree that mysteries in video games are pretty cool.
They're harder these days, though. Like, I mean, the next game we're probably going to talk about is Inside, and that was a game where after I finished it, the first thing I did was I just Googled it and found like all of this stuff that it's just like it was already done. Like, a few days.
The thing is, literally 2 days after it came out, there was a video of the secret ending, which should have been. It's really hard to unlock the secret ending.
Yeah, no,
it's really obscure how to get the secret ending of Inside.
But they would have known, and that's the fault of any designer who doesn't realize every single person who finishes their game with secrets is going to Google for the secret ending.
I think they do know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a problem. But the thing is that
did it, right?
Yeah,
but it makes me wonder, like, how do you even put in a secret that people aren't going to find? If something that obscure can be found within 2 days, it does make you really question.
I mean, it wasn't that. I don't know. I think you can.
You have to find all the collectibles, which, like, fair enough, you could do that. But then you have to go back to a very specific point in the game and find a new thing that wasn't there anymore.
I mean, I think you have to accept that people are going to find secrets in, like of that kind, but the Souls games, for example, have always been good at like sowing enough misinformation.
Yeah, well, I mean, no one's figured out what poise does in Dark Souls 3. It's been months.
Yeah,
no one has any idea.
I think it's just a bug, right?
It
doesn't work.
They claim it's working as intended, but then they won't tell us how as intended is.
But I mean, of course they're going to say that as opposed to, we shipped the game with something that does nothing.
No, but they said that after Dark Souls 1. They were like, oh yeah, some of this is fucked. Sorry. Like the humanity drop rate in the pre-patch Dark Souls 1 was broken.
Who knows?
And
Who knows?
Yeah.
So should we talk a bit about Inside?
Let's talk about Inside. What we'll probably do is at the end of the podcast, we might have a little spoilery chat about it. But to begin with, we'll just talk generally about it.
So don't skip ahead to the last 10 minutes of the podcast if you want to avoid spoilers. Otherwise, they'll be well signposted.
So I have a cool story about Inside. I went to the people who made it, Playdead.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people who made Limbo.
They're Danish.
In Copenhagen, and I went to see them in 2011 because I was commissioned to write a book about Limbo. It was going to be like a really fancy making of.
A
really beautiful, artistic, like the publisher who was doing it was basically an art book publisher, and it was going to be gorgeous, and I was supposed to do the words. So I went and I stayed with them for like 10 days, and I interviewed every single person who was remotely involved in the making of Limbo, and then I kind of put together this like big 40,000 word sort of making of, and the story.
You can't wave your hands like that when saying 40,000 words.
It was
That's a lot of words.
It was so many words. I was trying to remember how many words. Anyway, I put together like a short book length thing on it, and then it never actually got published, which was super annoying. But it was just one of those things. Like I got paid for it, but I was really upset that it never got out there. But when I was there in 2011, they had a working prototype of Inside.
Okay.
And
that seems like a long time ago,
right?
It's been in development for a long time.
It's been in development for 6 and a bit years.
Okay.
And so when I, basically I'd earned their trust after a week, and they let me play their prototype of their new thing. And I swear to God, it's literal scenes from the finished game. It's obviously the graphics weren't there, but the scenes were in place already 5 years ago now. And that to me, like this developer is fascinating. They are the guy. There's 2 people at the head of it. One's the business dude, very smart business guy, and the other is this chap who called Arndt Jensen, who's kind of the art guy.
Okay. Didn't Limbo also have some difficulties in terms of it coming out?
Yes, so this is it. Like Limbo went through exactly the same development curve as Inside. Basically, Limbo
seems like less of a curve and more of like a sort of alpine ski run.
Exactly, yeah, it's like a Black Diamond ski run. Like Limbo nearly didn't come out. There were 4 separate occasions on which they couldn't pay people, nearly went bust. Things fell through. They just took too long. Because they took fucking forever to make Limbo. And the idea of taking 5 years to make a 2-3 hour long game back then was completely unheard of. And of course there are more games that are that kind of length, but usually it's because you spend a couple of years on them. That's why they're short. You can get them out quickly. But they've obviously been taking exactly the same approach to Inside, and I imagine it's been just as stressful for everybody working on it. I really imagine there's been a lot of points where lots of different investors and other people have been like, when is this fucking game coming out?
Oh my God.
Well, it very much does feel like the finished work of perfectionists.
Yeah, but the Arndt Jensen is a huge perfectionist, and everyone who works for him shares that tendency. He seems to hire people who work that way. Like the puzzle designer, who I think is called Jeppe Carlsen, But he thinks in a really fascinating way.
Is it worth if anyone has got this far through the podcast without knowing what Inside is?
Oh shit! Yes.
Inside is basically, it's really similar to Limbo in many regards. It's a 2D bleak platformer. However, for those of you who played Limbo, it was a bit of platforming, a bit of puzzle stuff, mostly moving around things and drag around this, jump on things. Very light stuff. Limbo was trickier, to be honest, in terms of its difficulty with the jumping and difficulty with the puzzles.
Yeah, it had a touch of the Super Meat Boy of try, fail, try, fail, try, fail.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like that punishing.
Sure,
Often it was more punishing because it was fuzzy on that regard.
Yeah,
it wasn't
like
good
random
enough.
physics and things. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
also
I mean, it mostly worked. There were like a few moments where
I found it pretty weak, to be honest. Like, I thought that the opening start of Limbo was fantastic. Towards the end, it started to be a bit more like slightly struggled with the monochrome in terms of flat signaling, in terms of there were certain areas where you had to do a very specific thing, and because they were working with a limited palette of literally 2 colors, there were bits where I found myself dying again and again and again because I just literally wasn't doing exactly what it wanted me to, because I hadn't spotted what it wanted me to do. And it's interesting that the Inside is like the same structure, but is so much stronger in every regard, in those regards, especially of being like it has a wider palette, so it's not just black and white, but it's still quite monochromatic.
quite
a lot of time.
muted, isn't it?
Very muted, but it just the platforming and stuff is a lot easier, a lot more fun. Puzzles are a lot easier.
And describe what actually happens in the game, as opposed to people thinking it's just sort of a boy running and being killed over and over again. Actually, that is exactly what it is.
I mean, that's what Limbo is, and that's
yeah. So, but Inside's more the story of a boy who initially appears to be trying to infiltrate some kind of something for some reason.
I mean, or just running away.
A horrible. I
thought he was running away at first.
Okay.
I mean,
well,
But then, of course, it turns out really you're running towards something.
Yes, it's a boy who is running from left to right through a kind of.
I thought what was gonna. Yeah, everything I thought about the game turned out to be wrong, but it seemed to me that he was trying to escape from this kind of horrible urban dystopia into nature. That's what I thought it was going to be.
Okay, but, I got a slightly different read, and it is possible to get different reads on generally what's happening.
Whenever you read like opening paragraphs of Limbo articles, and they're like a boy trying to infiltrate, and I was like, I got a completely different thing from that. But that's the thing about Playdead's games and Inside, is that it's very allegorical, but not in a kind of in a way that like if they don't. A lot of games that are allegorical and have messages and have metaphors and have like motifs and things. It's just so painfully obvious. You want to claw your own eyes out because they're like, hey, have you got the thing we're trying to say? We're trying to, have you seen? But in Inside, you have no idea what any of it's supposed to signify.
Here's what I would say. I'd agree with you in that most games are tremendously simple when it comes to trying to like express anything, artistically, trying to have sort of recurring motifs. Like, Christ, there's always.
They tend to have a simple idea and then express it really fucking obviously.
Which is fine because, hey, maybe games don't have a lot of experience. The thing that I got from finishing Limbo, if like spoilers for Limbo, is it's a game where you started going, oh, where's this going? And then you realize it's not going anywhere, and you finish it, especially when you finish it and then the game doesn't go anywhere, literally. If you've finished Limbo,
same with Inside,
right? And this is what I was going to say, is that I was disappointed by, no spoilers, but I was disappointed by Inside because you start it and it's a game so full of, it drips with atmosphere and theme and promise, and you wonder where's this going. And by the time I got to the end, I was very much in a sort of, really, that was your bet. I
don't know, man. Like I was like it. I kept just saying, what is, like, every half hour, well, not even every half hour, like every few minutes something happens. You're like, what is happening?
Well, this was the thing, because
it was so messed up.
After you've had your first few set of surprises, I was going, oh, wow, what, these are like the pieces of a bigger puzzle. And then by the end, it was like, no, they were all individual pieces.
That's actually very much the Playdead kind of style.
Yeah.
Like, you get lots of things, you start being like, ooh, what's happening? And it just all turns out to be quite kind of bleak and defeatist in a way.
I found there were like a bunch of pieces of a big puzzle. I just like the fact that you didn't get to put it together. And this is a really interesting thing. We've seen a few games recently which are like this, and they really are very divisive. But I really like it. I like the fact that we're starting to see more games where the narrative is not just made up of traditional plot points.
And it's not even like there is an answer. Like with Limbo, everyone was obsessed with being like, oh, but what does it all mean? There must be a correct answer. A correct interpretation.
And it's like these narratives aren't exactly stories, they're more expressive. They're more just like
situations.
They leave you feeling like you have no idea what just happened, and yet also having this weird innate feeling that you know exactly what that was about, but you can't explain it.
So let me just, I don't want to sound maybe as pessimistic as I just did. I really like, compared to 99% of video game plots, I think Inside was completely awesome, and it was like just so much fun discovering so much about the story. But when a game sort of starts scraping towards that level of quality, then I start comparing it to other things. I start comparing it to storytelling you'd find in other mediums, and that's when it's like, it's only because I'm holding it to such a high standard that I'm being a cock.
I mean, that's fair. I find one of the things I liked about Limbo and about Inside as well is that it kind of is a collection of images that provokes a kind of collection of different feelings.
Sure.
And that's sort of what the work is for me.
Yeah.
It's the collage of kind of things that it's made you think about and see.
So
rather than like, you're not trying to figure out a plot so much as you're just trying to kind of experience a collection of plots. It's like, there's no plot to a series of 12 paintings.
I think that's the thing, is it's more like that, and that's what I quite like. And but the thing is, I'm not saying is like it's a right or wrong thing. I just think it's very much a taste thing. That of this game felt to me like it wasn't really hinging off the structure of like a narrative structure. It was looking at a different type of creative medium. And I think also the fact that you are actually there in it does add something like that. And it wouldn't be acceptable in a film. If you had a film which was just sort of meandering points and then ended and you didn't really feel like it had any sense.
Oh, no, it's art house film.
Well, yeah, kind of
absolutely.
Yeah, lots of animation is like. Have you ever seen any Danish animation? I ended up watching some because of the Limbo book research, and oh my god.
Yeah. Well,
I was like, oh, Limbo didn't come out of nowhere.
Ah, that's interesting.
But I find those frustrating still. I still find art house movies frustrating. Like, I think, what was it, like Slipstream Color or something I saw? Like,
oh my god,
Upstream Color?
Upstream Color. Like, yeah, I watched that and I was like, I kind of enjoyed it. But again, I was like, what the fuck? But
that stayed with me though, that film.
It did, no, but that's the thing.
But the collection of images and feelings that it provoked stayed with me.
Exactly.
And
I'm kind
of... I didn't remember what happened in it.
Well, exactly. And I'm kind of open to that. And in games especially, it feels more intense because you're physically moving through these places and you're in them. And sometimes you walk away.
We're going to have to do a spoilery bit at the end.
Yeah, it's the thing.
It's
like
and Inside that just made me shit myself.
It was kind of like a curated gallery in a way. If I felt like I'd walked through this thing and it gave me a lot of intense feelings, and I can see why a lot of people, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter and stuff saying that the story didn't land for them. I'm like, I wasn't really looking for a story.
So I get what you're saying, but I think we can have both. And I think if you look at Journey, you see a game that is sort of a series of moments that does have this mystery of where am I going with this. But Journey, which I think has a slightly more skilled hand on the tiller, shows you, hey, you can just have a satisfying beat at the end of this. And I think Inside could have
that's very American though. Like, I mean, I think
I don't mean satisfying as in happy. I mean, it could have been
no, but the resolution point, like the idea of, this is something that's very interesting in the concept of myth and story in general, right? In Western myth, in the myth that we like, it tends to have a point. There has to be a moral. If you go back to Scandinavian myth and legend, the things like the Nibelungenlied, basically the plot of I'm doing air quotes, the plots of the Nibelungenlied is a bunch of really bad random shit happens and everyone dies.
Yeah.
And there's no like lesson from it and there's no resolution. And it is like, it's funny if you read it as a modern, like, Western reader, then it feels like a really unsatisfying story because there's no resolution. But the thing is that most stories were kind of like that. And I think when you look at, because this is a Danish game and, it is Nordic in its inspirations, and also I think in the way it treats the concept of story. And so the idea of it not having a satisfying something at the end to happen to tie it together, that might just be a kind of different cultural thing rather than a failure.
Again, I think you're raising a really good point, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I would say that so much of Inside is the game asking you, sort of prompting you to think about things. So much of even the wonderful audio comes from again, I don't want to say anything because it'll all be contained in the spoiler, but there are moments of reveals where the game goes, look at this, and then you go, oh, that means this is this. And
really? I never got any connection stuff. I just got...
I got a lot of connection stuff.
But
to be honest, I found the finale to be another giant puzzle piece. It wasn't, and that's the thing, is it wasn't something that fit in the puzzle piece, but it was, for me, the way it ended, I was like, that just raised more questions.
But I think as people who play video games, we have this collector fixer urge where it's like, I want to collect all of and we have the same approach to it. It's like, I want to collect, and same with Dark Souls, I want to collect all the elements of it and put them all together, and that's kind of how we like to think of story, and sometimes you just can't do that.
But the interesting thing about where I'd say Journey and some other games that have plots that I feel are stronger than Inside, even bearing in mind that Inside maybe was never meant to make a great deal of sense or resolve in a satisfying way, is that if you like, what is Inside trying to achieve? What are the emotions it's trying to foster? Whether that's sort of a sense of like loneliness or oppression or darkness or technology versus nature, like those are themes that could have been wrapped up better than they were.
I thought the themes were a lot more complex.
Yeah, I think this is a taste thing. Like, I mean, I feel like with Inside, I had a lot of quite complex emotions that were prompted by weird images and thoughts that those images,
Sure.
and that was a very personal thing. You know, as you play through the game, the thing is, most art basically has, you're going to feel this way in mind. It wants you to feel a certain way and think certain things, and it wants you to take you through its arc, and then it wants to drop you at the end, and everyone's had the same experience. And one of the cool things about Inside is that I feel like everyone would have a slightly different, like Limbo was like that. You know, some people picked up a lot of, like, I picked up a lot of anxiety from it. I picked up fear of death, a lot of like real proper like family anxiety from it. And then I spoke to other people who got completely different vibe from that game.
There are tons of different readings of Inside. I think that's why interesting. Even the fact on the basic level, like, oh, he's running away. Oh no, he's running to something. Like, and even I thought at the end, like,
I mean, that's the same as we just had with Inside. I was like, he's running away, and you guys were both thinking he's running to something.
So this is something that the video games industry actually has no literacy in. This idea that in any other form, you know, grown up like critical circles, you have people disagreeing. You have people saying this, you know, comic book.
Yeah, and there's no right answer.
Is garbage. It's awful for these reasons, and that's what we're approaching here. Where three of us can agree that Inside's a good game, but like we've never usually had video games where we have to disagree. You know, everyone agrees that, you know, Half-Life 2 was great. You know,
yeah, and that's very true. Like, critical consensus is a big.
And we just need to grow past that.
Factor. We will.
And we have to grow past like Metacritic and stuff as well.
Of course, yeah.
On Metacritic.
Of course, but it was fascinating to me that it was such a strange thing, and it reminded me an awful lot actually of two things. After I finished Braid the first time and just left with my head just buzzing with all these questions of being like, what the fuck is this all about? What the fuck is all this about? And it was more the fact that it was like, it's rare that I finish a game and then it leaves me thinking about it and running stuff through my head for days and days and days.
Sure, and I Braid did do that to me. Inside didn't. And I think maybe structurally a thing that Braid has is it remained as enigmatic as it always was all the way through. It's just at the end it still had something of a crescendo. And I suppose Inside does as well. But I'm thinking the last 10 seconds as opposed to the last 10 minutes.
I know what you mean. I do think it does that thing where it kind of builds and builds and builds and builds and builds and then just kind of goes.
So
that could be considered a failing, and I would understand. I feel like it might have been intentional.
Yeah, I enjoyed the surprise when it ended. I wasn't expecting that. I
didn't have that
which
thing.
I can.
You know, at the ending, the ending of Prometheus, where you just get to the ending and you're like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
I didn't have that reaction.
We've approached this ending enough now that I think this is the time to
Should we
declare spoilers.
Are we going to do questions and then spoilers, or are we going to?
I think
we're at the 50-minute mark. You've probably got people have to shoot off, so we have to just jump straight into it. I think
let's jump straight into
questions
a
next time.
Pot of spoilers. So
okay, spoiler warning.
Turn off in 5, 4, 3, 2. You know, you don't say 5 when you're firing guns. You go 6, 4, 3 because 5 sounds like fire.
Oh.
So you go 7, 6, 4. Anyway,
spoilers.
So if people have got this far and don't care what happens at the end of the Inside game, what happens is you get sucked into a big scientific experiment, which is, if you have played Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you will be aware of a giant ball of human bodies, which is one of the bosses, and you get sucked into that. It's a ball. It's an amalgamation of human flesh and limbs and heads, and your character gets sucked into it.
And it makes the horrible noise, my God.
And it's an amazing exercise in tech and sound design because for the final 5 minutes of the game, you control this blob. After being sucked into it, you become part of its consciousness, and you use basically the same control scheme you've been using before.
The game just changes. You're just smashing through everything.
Yeah, suddenly instead of hiding, you just crush things.
And the animation on that thing was absolutely incredible.
The animation, the tech, the sound as well.
The way, like, when you run and it loses, where the momentum is too much, it falls, but then it falls onto new limbs and you just keep rolling.
Distressing.
Genuinely horrendous.
The imagery of it really freaked me out properly. I mean, I think the other, of course, like the kind of narrative, the arc of the game is that you're running. First, you're running away and you're being chased by men with like tasery things. Basically, you're just trying to stay away from them, and then you get introduced to this really bizarre thing that seems to, at some point, this society appears to have gotten to the point where they've created like zombie workers.
Oh, the zombie workers, yeah,
of some variety.
They've created watery versions of themselves.
That too. I mean, what's interesting to me is what the vibe I got from it is that we're in a sort of post-industrial society where all the manual labor is done by essentially like shill kind of zombie shell people.
Yeah.
And what I was trying to figure out was, do they capture people and make them like that, or do they like genetically create them, or whatever?
Well,
And I thought the boy,
they load them into trucks.
yeah, but I thought the boy might have been like maybe an escapee from the, I don't know, the manual laborer farm or something. But then I moved past that because obviously later on in the game, when the blob turns up, you start thinking, oh no, they're doing genetic experiments. Then you're like, oh cool, so have they created this workforce of like mindless manual laborers through genetic experiments? But then and then kind of you sort of get more and more industrial as you break into the facility where this blob is held. But what really got me was the ramping tension of, at first you're being chased by dudes,
yeah,
and then you're very, very alone for a long time, and then you end up in this kind of horrible underwater section where there's just these fucking, I don't know how to describe
that moment
them,
when you
like
first go down into the sea in that sub.
Oh yeah,
Christ
hell.
almighty.
Like,
And then
beautiful.
and the only thing down there with you in the sea is this, it's like the Ring, the protagonist of the Ring.
Well, that's the interesting thing,
like
is
the
that,
girl with all the hair, but
and
like
again,
an underwater mermaid, like
this is why,
creepy
and this
fucking-
is all
and
the
it
pieces
just
that
gets-
I started like to put together and got really kind of into, is the fact that it's not a girl, it's just a boy, and it's like you,
Yeah.
but with hair. So it's like loads of hair.
Well,
so
it
it's
could be
like,
a boy or a girl, right?
Yes,
it's a thing.
but, and this is what I mean, is when you start to extrapolate all of these things from afar, you start to actually have some really, really weird and interesting puzzle pieces.
But then, so the bit that really screwed with my head was essentially the underwater dudes, right? Or whatever they are. When they get to you, they drown you, and it's horrible. Like, that's a real, like, I hate the sea and drowning, and that really horrible. But then at some point, there's a point where they catch you, but then they seem to do something to help you.
They plug into your head.
So
the
help is a
and
strong
then you
word.
and then you can breathe underwater, but they kind of gently caress you and everything, and then you sink to the bottom of the ocean, and there's this real reversal of danger suddenly, and that's the point at which the game starts to reverse, because then you're suddenly not afraid of the water because you can breathe, and you have one up on everything that's trying to kill you because you have this new power, and you start to feel slightly more powerful, and then of course that builds towards becoming part of the blob.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
I mean, the story theory that I've kind of put together in my head through looking at a bunch of things, and this is why I love this game, because I just think there are loads of clues. It's just some of them are quite subtle. Is that initially you are being controlled, because the thing you unlock when you find all the secrets and go underground is you basically find that the boy is being controlled by someone with one of those heads. And like when you go and switch off one of those the power facility that you're in, the boy kind of slumps, and the idea
Which is that classic video game thing of you're not the protagonist, you were controlling the protagonist.
which I always suspected. Like when I was playing the game, that was a really early thing. I thought as soon as you realize that you can chain those control helmets, it's like, okay, well that means there's a really good chance that my character is currently being controlled by someone else somewhere.
by someone somewhere who for some reason wants that blob out.
But that was an early. Well, no, this is the thing. There's some key steps here which are really interesting, in the fact that you're controlling this boy, right? Up until you fall into that water and then get dragged down. At which point, at that point, there's a real chance that then you are now being controlled by the blob.
Yeah.
And so whatever the boy was going to do originally, it's like...
Wait, why would you be being controlled by the blob?
The blob draws it to him and gets him to...
But draws how?
Because you're then like, why would these things try and drag you down? Basically,
So
my
think about it. The blob is connected by lots of big wires to whatever freaking central nervous system is going on in this thing, right? So the blob has a helmet on, put it that way.
But that's a guess.
Yeah, of course it's a guess. Everything's a guess.
Well, no, but the blob has these things attached to it, which means it's controlling something.
So the blob has access, presumably, to the same network.
Other things connected to the blob, the helmet cups.
They could be.
They're exactly the same as the helmet cups.
Yeah,
those are two different answers, ladies.
Well, no, they are exactly the same.
Yeah, when you pull them off, like the things you have to pull off, because you have to free the blob from its cords.
Yeah, they look exactly the same.
They
as
do
the
look like
things.
them, and and obviously, what happens when you get drowned is another head thing changes.
Well, the thing is, you also realise
you've been hijacked.
There's a couple of things you start to realise that. So to begin with, you see the pigs with the worms, and so you know those worms are what control things, and you realise the pigs aren't trying to kill you exactly; they're just like running into you like the guys do. And then you realise that all these people, these humans, must have these worms inside. There's something about this parasite, which is what controls people. But then you have the ability. So at first, you can control people when you're wearing one of these helmets. But then later, you realise, well, after you've been dragged down into the water by these things and given something by these creatures with the long hair, you then can control things without the helmet. It means you've somehow gained this ability to be a part of this network without the tech. And what that is unclear. But you could argue that these long-haired boys are just something similar to you, And the reason they're being kept in these labs and that you find them in like escape from labs as they're hiding things is because the scientists are trying to work out, right? This is the thing. The idea is that for some reason, like this brain thing in my head, what it is, this brain thing is what controls these worker armies. The thing you become at the end is what is controlling these things. But there are weird rogue things that don't behave properly and they're aggressive and they're strange. And it's almost like the brain's controlling these things and these are like its actual will.
But here's the thing, that isn't actually a story. That's just one of those charts that Gamergate make that shows who's controlling everything.
No, that's bullshit.
No, it's
man.
not
That's
at all.
fucking
It's an
bullshit,
interpretation
you know
of. It's an interpretation of what you're given.
No, sure, and I get that. It's an interpretation of what's
Well, Inside
actually
doesn't really
happening.
have a story. Inside story is boy runs to the right, becomes part of Blob, and then Blob dies. Like, that's
Right.
the story.
That's
the
what I
plot.
mean. There's so many like expressive details to play with that there's so much to extrapolate from that you can reasonably
And like
suggest.
plot is 1/3 of any good story. You know, the rest of it is atmosphere and visual stuff. Like, there's loads and loads and loads of aspects to story that aren't plot.
And then finally, this is the thing that weirds me out the most about the whole thing. Let's just say that initially you are going in under the control of this person with this helmet, and then maybe there's a swap over, and then maybe now the boy is being controlled by the entity, which is why it's helping to free it. Because when the boy, like maybe it's a thing of the entity goes, no, you're one of ours now, and you're going to help us do this. The weirdest thing, when you crash down as the blob through the roof, one of the things is a diorama of the hill that the game ends on.
Mm-hmm.
And there is literally like on the picture of the hill, on this big 3D model of the hill, there is a spot which highlights the spot where the blob stops rolling.
But here's the thing. I think the way you're
also, sorry. Only during the escape with the blob, you're sort of crashing through, and there's before you get all of the workers in this factory or this science, whatever, all the people are drawn to it. You see people just abandoning their workstations and suddenly going up and sort of putting their hands on the glass and not paying attention to you anymore. Like, whenever you've seen a person, they've been trying to catch you. I get the impression that Blob does exert some kind of force.
No.
People are compelled to kind of go and stare at it.
No, because then they start helping you.
That's it. So I think the Blob is getting, somehow, it exerts this compelling force on things around it that are getting people to help it. Because the worker, even though you've just rampaged through killing people and smashing everything up, there's points where workers, firstly, they're fascinated by you. They're always trying to get close to you. And secondly, they try and help you, and I think that must be something to do with.
No, I thought that,
influence.
but then it's the fact that you realise they're leading you to a trap. That's why they're helping you. It's because
the trap, though?
The trap is when they want you, and that's where they're literally dangling a toy above you for you to grab it, and then they open the trap door and you fall into the chamber.
That's a good point, yeah.
That's why they're helping you. Is they're trying to goad him into this area so they can trap him. But the weird thing is, and this is why again this is what I love about it, and this is why I can completely understand that people would not love this and be frustrated by this. But the fact that when you go into that room, it is full of people watching you. It makes me feel like partly I think this is a trap, but the number of people who are all there in the shadows watching makes me feel more like it's an experiment, and this is all just part of the experiment. And they know this is going to happen. And the fact that then if you extrapolate that, the idea that they knew eventually you would be brought here, and that's why this room is full of these people waiting to see this happen. But then also the fact that they have a diorama with a marked point of where it will stop rolling once it comes out and goes down the hill.
That's a new detail on
it. It makes you think, well, if they knew this was going to happen, then you start to, again, when you look at all of these creatures with the long black hair, which appear to be just like the boy, but having lived underwater for a long time and grown their hair, it starts to raise loads of, and again, I don't have answers for it, but it makes you think, what the fuck is this? Like,
well, see, this is what I was going to say, is that what you seem to be having loads of fun with now is just untangling this like massive meta puzzle of what is actually happening.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't think the game is set up to be a meta puzzle. I think it's.
But this is.
I don't think there are answers to these questions.
But we can agree that it's successal at whatever, because at least that Matt is enjoying picking apart.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not. The reason it's not like the thing is there's not going to be one person that gets the right answer and wins the prize. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. Like, that's what I liked about Limbo as well, is that, I mean, for me, the what will stay with me about Inside is there's just a collection of really disturbing, thought-provoking images and experiences. Like there's a few just moments in it where just kind of made me think slightly differently.
I really liked when you get sighted by the robots and you get the instant taser. The sound effect. I think the sound is probably my favorite thing about the game.
Oh, the sound design was fantastic.
Yeah, the coil that springs out immediately and then zaps you.
Drags you away. It drags you up. Horrible. But it's funny how the death in it just becomes an atmospheric thing. It's just chilling rather than frightening. You just get used to it and think, what the fuck is this world?
I don't know, like the death if you're underwater in the submarine and you let the hair mermaid get too close and it just like tries to crack into like an egg.
Yeah.
And then it's because it's inevitable and it happens and it takes like 5 seconds to happen every time and it's really chilling. So distressing.
Yeah, no, it's genuinely a really weird, frightening thing, but it's fascinating that, like, I think, as you say, it's like one of these things where, like, in my mind, what it ends up being is a toy box for like your own mind to just go nuts with trying to work out what it is.
Well, see, this was my the thing it ultimately ended up disappointed me doing is that I think it set up stuff that it then didn't really complete. So like
but
then this is why I think it actually would have been stronger if it had been what you described of like a series of vignettes within the same world or within the same style. Whereas what it did for me that I did really enjoy it and I thought it was a very strong piece of work. But the thing of like the first thing you see, right, people with masks. Or like the pig, sort of the weird parasites that live in the pigs. Like it constantly sets up mysteries and then doesn't actually like. There's no what's behind the mask. There's no.
That's precisely the thing I like about it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
and this is interesting because you say stronger, but what you mean is you would have liked it more, which is a completely different thing.
Well,
because I think actually that lots of people.
It's easier for them to set up mysteries.
Now you see, I disagree with that because I think there is a really thin line between crafting something like this, where you have enough things where there is enough room for you to extrapolate on these things, to have a real inert sense, not inert, and a real like implicit sense of vaguely what's going on, but then also to theorize without it just being a bunch of stuff. And I think that it's a really unusual thing, but I think there's a real skill in what they've done here, and they do it really well. Because I actually often bounce off things like this real hard. I just go, this is bollocks. You're making me do all the work. This is bollocks. But this I thought was really well measured, and I thought that there was like a really clever use of focus throughout to make sure that there were key things you noticed and there were key points that it meant that everything you kind of noticed there was some significance to it.
And it's
like up to you to work it out.
If you ever get the privilege to meet the guys who make that game, like
they won't tell you.
but he thinks about every second of that game, and the reason these games take so long is every single second of the game is made, and like. Things like what you're supposed to look at and where you're supposed to go and what you're, it's not just in the game design sense of, oh, where's the bit I need for this puzzle, but in the artistic sense of where are they supposed to be looking, what am I drawing their attention to, and when you have moments like what because I was in this state of hyper awareness playing Inside because I just know it's the kind of
you're aware of all the work that goes into every single
exactly
scene.
So I was sitting there, and whenever something specific would happen, I'd see something go on the corner. Like there's a bit where you're in a warehouse and a truck comes in to take you know when to pay attention basically, and in that way, like in the same way that Nintendo is very good at signposting things from a gameplay point of view, Playdead are probably the best developer I know at signposting things from a kind of artistic experience point of view. Like this is when to pay attention. This is when to kind of open your eyes, as it were. And
I just made a video about it actually, which is not got any spoilers in it, but it's talking about it's almost like a camera lens. I think they do a really good job of like keeping lots of areas purposefully fuzzy so that your focus is grabbed at the right point.
And when you're going left to right in a platformer that's 2 and a bit D, you have that authorial, directorial power. In a way that you don't when you let the player go wherever they want.
There was a moment where I thought that when you become part of the big flashy thing and you start smashing the state, for a while, all you do is go left. And, you return. I thought it would be a case of essentially undoing the entire fascist system and growing or changing and rolling.
But that would be the obvious thing. Like because again, I came up, like, as I played it, I sort of naturally wondered about what was going to happen. And I came up with so many, like, really obvious things, like, oh, you're trying to get back into nature. Or, and again, when I got the blah, blah, we're going to go left now and we're going to smash everything up and that'll be satisfying and we'll smash the bad dystopian, I came up with all these obvious things that might have happened. And they might have been more satisfying in a way, but then when none of it happened and you just end up dead on the hill, I thought it was better.
I mean, I'm not saying what I thought would have been better. Definitely not. I think it's, fine. It's all good. It's a good game. People
I wonder
play
if it was dead or just deactivated or something. I don't know. And what is the purpose of it? Was it?
What's it for?
Yeah.
There's so many bits of that game that I just thought, what is this for? Like, and it's very good at foreshadowing. The spider in Limbo is a fantastic example of foreshadowing because you see it 3 or 4 times before before it gets you, and then so you learn to fear it. And Inside does that with the mermaid things. You see them 3 or 4 times before you have any interaction with them, and to fear it, then to be worried about it. And And of course, in Limbo, the fantastic inversion of that is when it's after you and you just pull its legs off. Like that moment of when the Limbo spider is sort of defeated and you're just pulling all of its legs off to kill it. It's such a perfect moment.
But it's again,
that
it's the fascinating thing. Like it doesn't actually like the It does sort of kill you. Those are the things with the long hair, the underwater things. They do kill you. But then it's interesting that it's like then it gets to a certain point in the story where it's supposed to kill you, and then you see what happens, and you kind of think, well, yeah, it's this weird thing of it's like it doesn't want to kill you in the same way that a dog wants to kill you. It wants to drown you so then it can take you off and do something to it so then you are changed. And you kind of feel like because you never encounter really those things again after that. And that's because I think you're one of them now.
Also, another thing that changes when that happens, when you're at the bottom of the ocean, is the fish all start to just follow you around.
Well, that's because
fish are all just drawn to you.
That's because that's the first time. And you think, but then it's weird because the chicks do the same thing. It's something about the animals always follow you, which is the idea like there's something about...
But wait, hang on, no, because the chicks follow you because in a way that
they'd follow the mother chick.
Exactly. I thought
Sorry,
that
the hen.
Was
the mother chick.
And the fish are just eating off you. The fish just nibble. There's vibration through the pad when they come up and nibble you. If you stay still, they will come and nibble.
Well, there's vibration on the pad when the people come around you as well.
Yeah.
But the people don't nibble you, and if they did, I would approve.
No, I don't know. I think
I thought that because the friendly zombies, I thought again another obvious thing that could have happened would have been, oh, the friendly zombies will turn on you at some point, or something will happen. You'll get ripped apart by them, or they'll be dangerous. But again, like pretty much everything that I thought might happen didn't, and then just random shit happened. But it didn't feel like so. A good example of what you're talking about, just a bunch of shit happening, is a lot of Japanese games, like because of the sort of.
I definitely don't want my whatever I'm saying now to be like held up as a principle by the madcap Japanese bullshit.
Well, something like El Shaddai, which is a game I love. I love that game. It's hilarious, but it's bullshit. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of random shit happening, and like completely random visual cues.
And Satan wears jeans.
There's a bit where Satan wears jeans and has a smartphone.
You have a dance competition.
You have a dance competition. You dance to Michael Jackson. I mean, it's great.
The third Bible, the longer-awaited third Bible.
It's great, but it doesn't mean anything. You know?
Yeah.
And like you're saying, the kind of craftedness of inside, like it's not just a bunch of random things happening and leaving a bunch of stuff open. There is intent to it. But I think the intent might just be to make you feel something.
Sure, and I really did like the bit in the middle where you walk past the massive sound waves of.
Oh my god, that was terrifying! I'd forgotten about that bit.
Yeah, that was excellent. Whatever it was, yeah. And I guess I just I don't know. I've already said my piece. It's fine.
But that's what the proper like interesting. Things that are worthy of proper interesting criticism.
Limbo was about people sure, and Limbo was one of the most divisive games I'm aware of.
Limbo didn't have enough pieces for me though. I found like it was
Limbo was one-dimensional by comparison.
Yeah, there wasn't enough to play with in my head, and I kind of thought it was one of those things where it was like a toy had been put in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, so I bop it away. I'm like, oh, whatever, like maybe it's this, but it wasn't enough pieces to really extrapolate from and really start drilling down to what was going on.
I did like Limbo an awful lot. But it had so Limbo's main mystery was around what happened to the sister, because the only line of
she would wander off to the stage right.
Yeah, so the main thing, like, so the main theories around Limbo were all centered around who is the boy, what happened to his sister, are they dead? Those are basically the only three questions, whereas Inside has a bunch more.
There's a ton of stuff.
Yeah,
but I just really like when games are able to exist in that space of being like completely unclear, because my favorite thing about playing the original BioShock, everyone always talks about BioShock and about the twist, but actually my favorite thing about BioShock was I was playing it at a point when I was working ridiculously long shifts in a restaurant, and it meant that I'd play it for 3 hours and then I'd go and work, and I just would spend all of this time thinking about all of the players and all of the audio tapes, and I actually managed to piece together a lot of the stuff, like in terms of the machinations of these characters of being like, oh, but he was using her, and like basically putting together an audio play in my head and then when the big reveal came, it was like everything fell into place, and I went, oh my god, this is a massive conspiracy.
I feel like I often play games too quickly to allow them to live like that in my mind.
And that's the problem, is you finish it and then
you move on.
The resolution, you move on, you're done. You kind of go, okay, and it's really satisfying to have a game where the end ties everything off and you go, oh, okay, that's awesome. But it's kind of nice to have stuff that lingers with you as well, stuff that you carry around with you.
This is why I loved writing that Dark Souls book, because it was the only game I thought about for.
And it's because that's a game that has
months.
so few answers.
And there was enough to think about that I could think about it only for 6 months. And it became a much more satisfying experience, because if you just play through it in a weekend and then move on, you don't get nearly as much out of it as you do if you really take your time.
And it's even actually I end up comparing Inside a lot to Half-Life 2. Obviously, I don't think it's nearly as good as Half-Life 2 in many regards, in terms of Half-Life 2 was one of the best things ever made at the time, and it was structurally strong for so many reasons. But Inside had a lot in common with it, and I think one of the key things about Half-Life 2 is, again, that was one of those things where you didn't really know what was going on, but you sort of did. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, we don't have time to talk about now, Gordon. Gotta go." But you could see that the world was really changed and fucked up, and you just had to kind of vaguely fill in the gaps about what was happening now and what had happened. And I think a lot of my enjoyment of Half-Life 2, people want Half-Life 3, but then if that came out, people would want answers from it. And it seemed to be I don't know, it's answers would kind of ruin it. I still love the world of Half-Life 2 and C-17 and the Combine, because I don't know what the fuck it is exactly, and that's cool. That's really cool. But if that had been the end, if Half-Life 2 was the end and people walked away from that not being told what the deal was with all of this stuff exactly, people might have felt about it really differently.
Sure. I think there is a difference between needing to provide closure and then sort of provide... You don't need to leave things as just a sort of upturned, unfinished mystery in the way that Inside partially does. It doesn't need to have an ending. It doesn't need to have closure. But I think they are so good at crafting scenes that are so beautiful, like the Soundwave thing, which has
the individual scenes in Inside are beyond compare.
So I think it's a team that is unbelievably talented at crafting an individual scene or palette, which is just so beautiful, and will do that first and foremost. Rather than the Soundwave channel in the middle has no bearing or relation.
That's what we were saying at the beginning. It's like a series of moments. I felt like Inside was a series of moments. It felt to me like a. I mean, actually, Matt's kind of tied it together much more than I did in my head. I was happy to leave it as like a gallery, going through a sequence of moments. But you're making me think maybe there is actually quite a lot more sort of structural stuff going on.
But it's again, you start to hit a wall where it's that's the wall. I think
there's no more.
But
it's definitely super awesome that I didn't realize that the blob falls in the glass display.
That's just weird.
That's fun.
The fact that it falls into it, but then it's a maquette,
and that's where it ends up ultimately.
Where it's going to be. The fact they've already mapped out where it's going to be before it gets there.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's fucking really cool. Weird. It makes you think a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, I think it's pretty cool that we got to a point where it wasn't that many years ago that you'd have you got to play this 2D emotional story thing and everyone would just love it. I think it's great that we got to a point where people don't love it, and not just because they go, "Oh, these games are for girls," I think it's nice that we can get to a point where we actually have
not good value
tastemakers, of taste of being hey, I like this sort of thing. There's loads of types that I can't be doing with Russian cinema, for example. Some people love it, but I'd love it if we can get to a point where we actually have names for these things. Be no, it's one of these, I don't like them.
Well, we've got Walking Simulator. Let's work on breaking that down.
Yeah, let's work on improving that shit.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to Daft Souls, everybody.
Yeah. And if you want to comment on the stuff we've been talking about, you can go and do so at coolghost.net. And it will be a post on the main page.
And you know what I want to do? I genuinely haven't seen your Inside video yet, and I want to know what you have to say about camera angles. So you can do that on coolghost.net as well?
Yeah. That video went up last week. So yeah, it's about weird
scroll down,
designs.
Give it a cheeky
Give it a little look. It's quite short. If you've already finished Inside, yeah, do it. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us, Keza McDonald.
You're welcome.
Where can people still find your work that
if you would still like to find the work that I do and the really talented people who work also for my website,
you don't have to follow my terrible grammar.
You can go to kotaku.co.uk.
Fantastic.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.